Good evening. Welcome to day 28 of the International Great Black Read Aloud Day 2024. And we're happy to be back with you tonight. We missed last night, but we will record and get going. Is anyone and get them out, I should say. so we have our selections, and so we'll make sure that we record our readings because we really do like to go live. Um, for our reading selections. However, we don't always make it. This has been an extremely busy month, and um, we're making it through. Is anyone else as surprised as I am that March is almost here already? Well, my name is LD Robinson, and I am your reading host for this evening here at the International Great Black Read Aloud Day, where we give voice to words written by Black people all around the world. And so we have a great selection for tonight, bit of a historical selection for tonight, which is travel. And we want you to do a couple of things before we get started. We want you to say that you want to subscribe to our website and get on our mailing list so that you can stay abreast of all the things that will be happening throughout the year. We also want to invite you to follow us online at social media at Black Read Aloud. Okay. Well, we have our selection, as I said, today is historical in nature. It's a historical text, and we are going to read part of the text, and we'll start at a particular place. But it is a text about traveling, and what travel has the potential to do when one is courageous. And so, our text today is again, it's day 28, travel day. And our text for today is The History of Mary Prince, a West Indian Slave. And so, we will put up the we're going to put up our, looks like we're having some internet issues. I'm going to put up our cover, and let's take off a couple of these banners here. Doing too much. So here is our cover. One of the many covers. This is a historical text, so written in the early 1800s. Therefore, this text has been uh, shapen by many throughout the years. But these are Mrs. Prince's words. These are her words as they were told to the gentleman that recorded it. Recorded her story for her, and it is a raw um, a raw description of life as one enslaved, particularly with very brutal and harsh owners, slave masters. And so we're going to pick up the story in this case. And let me take this off so that you can actually see me while I'm talking to you. We are going to pick up the story um, as she meets her husband. Things transpire before that, and a little bit in the travel scene of this story of her retold history, our own history, her story. She started out in, I believe, Bermuda, then the Turks, then Antigua, and now she's still here in her last Caribbean stop, and we're going to pick up the story here. And um, our our selection is the history of Mary Prince. Okay. The Moravian ladies. Let me go back here. And um, you have to forgive me. I had my reader um, against my self, and it moved my chapter. Okay, we're just about there. Let's see. It really moved my chapter like a lot. So let me do it this way. And I do apologize. It moved my spot. Didn't move my cheese, but it moved my spot. Okay. And all right, here we are. Sometime after I began to attend the Moravian church, I met with Daniel James, afterwards my dear husband. He was a carpenter and cooper to his trade, an honest, hard-working, decent black man and widower. He had purchased his freedom of his mistress, old Mrs. Baker, with money he had earned whilst a slave. When he asked me to marry him, I took time to consider the matter over with myself, and would not say yes till he went to church with me and joined the Moravians. He was very industrious after he bought his freedom, and he had hired a comfortable house and had convenient things about him. We were joined in marriage about Christmas 1826 in the Moravian chapel at Spring Gardens by the Reverend Mr. Olafson. We could not be married in the English church. English marriage is not allowed to slaves, and no free man can marry a slave woman. When Mr. Wood heard of my marriage, he flew into a great rage and sent for Daniel, who was helping to build a house for his old mistress. Mr. Wood asked him who gave him a right to marry a slave of his. My husband said, "Sir, I am a free man, and thought I had a right to choose a wife. But if I had known Molly was not allowed to have a husband, I should not have asked her to marry me." Mrs. Wood was more vexed about my marriage than her husband. She could not forgive me for getting married, but stirred up Mr. Wood to flog me dreadfully with a horsewhip. I thought it very hard to be whipped at my time of life for getting a husband. I told her so. She said that she would not have nigger men about the yards and premises, or allow a nigger man's clothes to be washed in the same tub where hers were washed. She was fearful, I think, that I should lose her time in order to wash and do things for my husband. But I had then no time to wash for myself. I was obliged to put out my own clothes, though I was always at the wash tub. I had not much happiness in my marriage, owing to my being a slave. It made my husband sad to see me so ill treated. Mrs. Wood was always abusing me about him. She did not lick me herself, but got her husband to do it for her, whilst she fretted the flesh off of my bones. Yet for all this she would not sell me. She sold 5 slaves whilst I was with her. But though she was always finding fault with me, she would not part with me. However, Mr. Wood afterwards allowed Daniel to have a place to live in our yard, which we were very thankful for. After this, I fell ill again with the rheumatism, and was sick a long time, but whether sick or well, I had my work to do. About this time I asked my master and mistress to let me buy my own freedom. With the help of Mr. Burchell, I could have found the means to pay Mr. Wood, for it was agreed that I should afterwards serve Mr. Burchell a while for the cash he was to advance me. I was earnest in the request to my owners, but their hearts were hard, too hard to consent. Mrs. Wood was very angry. She grew quite outrageous. She called me a black devil, and asked me who had put freedom in my head. To be free is very sweet, I said, but she took good care to keep me a slave. I saw her change color, and I left the room. About this time my master and mistress were going to England to put their son to school and bring their daughters home, and they took with me to take care of the child. I was willing to come to England. I thought that by going there I should probably get cured of my rheumatism, and should return with my master and mistress quite well to my husband. My husband was willing for me to come away, for he had heard that my master would free me, and I also hoped this might prove true, but it was all a false report. The steward of the ship was very kind to me. He and my husband were in the same class in the Moravian church. I was thankful that he was so friendly, for my mistress was not kind to me on the passage, and she told me when she was angry that she did not intend to treat me any better in England than in the West Indies, that I need not expect it, and she was as good as her word. When we drew near to England, the rheumatism seized all my limbs worse than ever, and my body was dreadfully swelled. When we landed at the tower, I showed my flesh to my mistress, but she took no great notice of it. We were obliged to stop at the tavern till my master got a house, and a day or two after, my mistress sent me down into the wash house to learn how to wash in the English way. In the West Indies, we wash with cold water, in England, with hot. I told my mistress I was afraid that putting my hands first into the hot water and then into the cold would increase the pain in my limbs. The doctor had told my mistress long before I came from the West Indies, that I was a sickly body and the washing did not agree with me. But Mrs. Wood would not release me from the tub, so I was forced to do as I could. I grew worse, and I could not stand to wash. I was then forced to sit down with the tub before me, and often through pain and weakness was reduced to kneel or to sit on the floor to finish my task. When I complained to my mistress of this, she only got into a passion as usual, and said washing in hot water could not hurt anyone, that I was lazy and insolent, and I wanted to be free of my work, but that she would make me do it. I thought her very hard on me, and my heart rose up within me. However, I kept still at that time, and went down again to wash the child's things. But the English washerwomen who were at work there, when they saw that I was so ill, had pity upon me and washed them for me. After that, when we came up to live in Lake Street, Mrs. Wood sorted out 5 bags of clothes which we had used at sea, and also such as had been worn since we came on shore, for me and the cook to wash. Elizabeth, the cook, told her that she did not think that I was able to stand to the tub, and that she had better hire a woman. I also said myself that I had come over to nurse the child, and that I was sorry that I had come from Antigua, since mistress would work me so hard without compassion for my rheumatism. Mr. and Mrs. Wood, when they heard this, rose up in a passion against me. They opened the door and bade me get out. But I was a stranger, and I did not know one door in the street from another, and was unwilling to go away. They made a dreadful uproar, and from that day they constantly kept cursing and abusing me. I was obliged to wash, though I was very ill. Mrs. Wood, indeed, once hired a washerwoman, but she was not well treated, and would come no more. My master quarreled with me another time about one of our great washings, his wife having stirred him up to do so. He said he would compel me to do the whole of the washing given out to me, or if I again refused, he would take a short course with me. He would either send me down to the brig in the river to carry me back to Antigua, or he would turn me out at once of doors and let me provide for myself. I said I would willingly go back if he would let me purchase my own freedom. But this enraged him all, but this enraged him more than all the rest. He cursed and swore at me dreadfully, and said he would never sell my freedom. If I wished to be free, I was free in England, and I might go and try what freedom would do for me. My heart was very sore with this treatment, but I had to go on. I continued to do my work and did all I could to give satisfaction, but all would not do. Shortly after, the cook left them, and then matters went on 10 times worse. I always washed the child's clothes without being commanded to do it, and anything else that was wanted in the family, though still I was very sick indeed. When the great washing came round, which was every 2 months, my mistress got together again a great many heavy things, such as bed ticks, bed coverlets, and etc., for me to wash. I told her I was too ill to wash such heavy things that day. She said she supposed I thought myself a free woman, but I was not, and if I did not do it directly, I should be instantly turned out of doors. I stood a long time before I could answer, for I did not know well what to do. I knew that I was free in England, but I did not know where to go or how to get my living, and therefore I did not like to leave the house. But Mr. Wood said he would send for a constable to thrust me out, and at last I took courage and resolved that I would no longer, that I would not be, let me say that again. And at last I took courage and resolved that I would not be longer thus treated, but would go and trust to Providence. This was the fourth time they had threatened to turn me out, and go where I might, I was determined now to take them at their word, though I thought it very hard after I had lived with them for 13 years and worked for them like a horse to be driven out in this way, like a beggar. My only fault was being sick, and therefore unable to please my mistress, who thought she could never get enough work out of her slaves. And I told them so, but they only abused me and drove me out. This took place from 2 to 3 months, I think, after we came to England. When I came away, I went to the man, one Mash, who used to black the shoes of the family, and asked his wife to get somebody to go with me to Hatton Garden to the Moravian missionaries. These were the only persons I knew in England. The woman sent a young girl with me to the mission house, and I saw there a gentleman called Mr. Moore. I told him my whole story and how my owners had treated me, and asked him to take in my trunk with what few clothes I had. The missionaries were very kind to me. They were sorry for my destitute situation, and gave me leave to bring my things to be placed under their care. They were very good people, and they told me to come to the church. When I went back to Mr. Woods's to get my trunk, I saw a lady, Mrs. Pell, who was on a visit to my mistress. When Mr. and Mrs. Wood heard me come in, they set this lady to stop me, finding that they had gone too far with me. Mrs. Pell came out to me and said, "Are you really going to leave, Molly? Don't leave, but come into the country with me." I believe she said this because she thought Mrs. Wood would easily get me back again. I replied to her, "Ma'am, this is the fourth time my master and mistress have driven me out, or threatened to drive me, and I will give them no more occasion to bid me go. I was not willing to leave them, for I am a stranger in this country, but now I must go. I can stay no longer to be so used." Mrs. Pell then went upstairs to my mistress and told that I would go, and that she could not stop me. Mrs. Wood was very much hurt and frightened when she found that I was determined to go out that day. She said, "If she goes, the people will rob her and then turn her adrift." She did not say this to me, but she spoke it loud enough for me to hear, that it might induce me not to go, I suppose. Mr. Wood also asked me where I was going to. I told him where I had been, and that I should never have gone away had I not been driven out by my owners. He had given me a written paper some time before, which said that I had come with them to England by my own desire, and that was true. It also said that I left them of my own free will, because I was a free woman in England, and that I was idle and would not do my work, which was not true. I gave this paper afterwards to a gentleman who inquired into my case. I went into the kitchen and got my clothes out. The nurse and the servant girl were there, and I said to the man who was going to take out my trunk, "Stop before you take up this trunk and hear what I have to say before these people. I am going out of this house as I was ordered, but I have done no wrong at all to my owners, neither here nor in the West Indies. I always worked very hard to please them, both by night and day. But there was no giving satisfaction, for my mistress could never be satisfied with reasonable service. I told my mistress I was sick, and yet she has ordered me out of doors. This is the fourth time, and now I am going out." And so I came out and went and carried my trunk to the Moravians. I then returned to Mash the shoeblack's house and begged his wife to take me in. I had a little West Indian money in my trunk, and they got it changed for me. This helped to support me for a little while. The man's wife was very kind to me. I was very sick, and she boiled nourishing things up for me. She also sent for a doctor to see me, and he sent me medicine, which did me good, though I was ill for a long time with the rheumatic pains. I lived a good many months with these poor people, and they nursed me, and did all that lay in their power to serve me. The man was well acquainted with my situation, as he used to go to and fro to Mr. Wood's house to clean shoes and knives, and he and his wife were sorry for me. About this time, a woman of the name Hill told me of the Anti Slavery Society and went with me to their office to inquire if they could do anything to get me my freedom and send me back to the West Indies. The gentleman of the society took me to a lawyer who examined very strictly into my case, but told me that the laws of England could do nothing to make me free in Antigua. She came first to the anti slavery office in Aldermanbury about the latter end of November 1828. This is in um, this is a parenthetical statement from the gentleman who wrote this, who did the transcribing of her story. She came first to the anti slavery office in Aldermanbury about the latter end of November 1828, and her case was referred to Mr. George Stephen to be investigated. More of this hereafter. And now back to Mary's story. However, they did all they could for me, gave me a little money from time to time to keep me from want, and some of them went to Mr. Wood to try to persuade him to let me return a free woman to my husband. But though they offered him, as I have heard, a large sum for my freedom, he was sulky and obstinate, and would not consent to let me go free. This was the first winter I spent in England, and I suffered much from the severe cold, and from the rheumatic pains which still at times torment me. However, Providence was very good to me, and I got many friends, especially some Quaker ladies, who, hearing of my case, came and sought me out, and gave me good warm clothing and money. Thus I had great cause to bless God in my affliction. When I got better, I was anxious to get some work to do, as I was unwilling to eat the bread of idleness. Mrs. Mash, who was a laundress, recommended me to a lady for a charwoman. She paid me very handsomely for what work I did, and I divided the money with Mrs. Mash. For though very poor, they gave me food when my own money was done, and never suffered me to want. In the spring, I got into service with a lady who saw me at the house where I sometimes worked as a charwoman. This woman's name was Mrs. Forsyth. She had been in the West Indies, and was accustomed to blacks and liked them. I was with her 6 months, and went with her to Margate. She treated me well, and gave me a good character when she left in London. And parenthetically, she refers to written certification, which he also includes in the story. After Mrs. Forsyth went away, I was again out of place, and went to lodgings for which I paid 2 shillings a week, and found coals and candle. After 11 weeks, the money I had saved in service was all gone, and I was forced to go back to the anti slavery office to ask a supply till I could get another situation. I did not like to go back. I did not like to be idle. I would rather work for my living than get it for nothing. They were very good to give me a supply, but I felt shame at being obliged to apply for relief whilst I had strength to work. At last, I went into the service of Mr. and Mrs. Pringle, where I have been ever since, and I am as comfortable as I can be while separated from my dear husband, and away from my own country and all my friends and connections. My dear mistress teaches me daily to read the Word of God, and takes great pains to make me understand it. I enjoy the privilege of being able to attend church 3 times on the Sunday, and I have met with many kind friends since I have been here, both clergymen and others. The Reverend Mr. Young, who lives in the next house, has shown me much kindness, and taken much pains to instruct me, particularly while my master and mistress were absent in Scotland. Nor must I forget among my friends the Reverend Mr. Mortimer, the good clergyman of the parish, under whose ministry I have now sat for upwards of 12 months. I trust in God I have profited by what I have heard from him. He never keeps back the truth, and I think he has been the means of opening my eyes ere much to better understand the word of God. Mr. Mortimer tells me that he cannot open the eyes of my heart, that I must pray, but that I must pray to God to change my heart and make me to know the truth, and the truth will make me free. And that is our selection for tonight, for travel. Um, this is not a very, as I said before, it's not a very long account of Mrs. Prince's life. However, it is told in her own words, It was one, I believe, the first account of a an enslaved woman telling her story, and it was captured as such, um, and published. And there are original copies available in various places around the world. And we are, it's a story to read. It is one that tells of a history that some would love to bury. However, it is very true. And we have traveled today, and in this case, we have traveled from Antigua to England, where Mrs. Prince gets her freedom. Well, it has been day 28, travel day of the International Great Black Read Aloud Day. And we want to invite you to come back tomorrow. We're endeavoring to finish strong. And it seems like we are having like major internet problems tonight. Um, but we encourage you to come back with us and enjoy what happens tomorrow. We finish strong. Tomorrow is Open Genre Day, and so we have plenty that we can share as we explore any genre out there. Okay, and we do apologize for the internet issues tonight, and that may be a little bit of my fault in this case, and so I do apologize. Being in tech, I should know better. So we want to um, I hope you enjoyed today, and we will do a better job technology wise tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow. We want to invite you, of course, to read with us. And we're going to take these off, and we want to remind you of all the things that we've been doing. And most of this, we've covered a good portion of the month, but we still have some days that we need to make up. And those missed days are due to just external deadlines and things happening. But we will be back tomorrow for our open genre day, and we hope that you will join us here at the International Great Black Read Aloud Day 2024 edition. And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night or a good day, wherever you may be in this world.